And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Aviation weather for Saturday morning. Areas of marginal VFR and IFR up here from the northwest, Seward Peninsula, right on down into south central Alaska. The heaviest IFR along the North Gulf Coast areas. VFR, southwest interior, North Slope Arctic Coast VFR, and also the eastern part of the state here. VFR for the southeast coast for the afternoon. Some IFR slipping on into Prince of Wales Island there, otherwise to the north, staying VFR, and some lower conditions along the southern slopes of the central and western Brooks Range on out to the northwest coast. Also along the Alaska Range here, up to probably as far east as Isabel Pass, and then some IFR, eastern Kenai Peninsula into Prince William Sound, western Prince William Sound, Passage Canal, Whittier into Portage, those areas. A little bit IFR here, Kamishak Bay into northern Kodiak Island. Otherwise, out west here, kind of a disorganized area of IFR across the Bering Sea down in toward the central Aleutian areas. And for the morning hours Sunday, band of IFR with that front here pushing eastward slowly, spreading IFR almost to Nikolsky. Sunday morning, still looking at some lower conditions there, southern slopes of the central western Brooks Range out to the northwest coast. And not too bad elsewhere. Here down to the south, we got maybe some lingering marginal and IFR conditions for the western Alaska Range. And around the Talkeetnas could be a little marginal. Southeast coast, mostly marginal VFR there with some areas of IFR possible. And Kodiak Island looking like IFR for that area. And for the afternoon, not much change for Kodiak Island. This area of IFR staying well south of the North Gulf Coast, or with marginal VFR right up to the coastline, and mostly marginal for the Panhandle. Interior Alaska, Sunday afternoon, looking really good with VFR from the Arctic coast southward, right into Bristol Bay, northern Bering Sea VFR, and this another area of IFR out here with a weak system over the central Bering Sea. And again, spreading down into the Adak-Atka area, maybe the eastern Aleutians, possibly the Alaska Peninsula. And from there, taking a look at passes for Anatuvik and Adigan, both occasional IFR at times tomorrow. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, pretty good chance of some IFR on the eastern entrance of both those passes, as well as windy, as well as rainy. Windy, marginal VFR, lowest conditions to the south. And Isabel, marginal VFR, possibly, otherwise VFR. And for Mentasta, VFR. Tanita, occasionally marginal. And pretty good threat of seeing some IFR for Portage, especially on the eastern entrance. And Chilkoot and White, a good chance it'll be VFR. And for the freezing levels here, at the surface actually, along the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast, down the Alaska Peninsula, and then up into the Bering Sea there, looks like north of the Pribilof Islands, 2,000 feet, just barely reaching the east central Aleutians. And icing, a weak system out here to the west, or a weakening system, I'll say, out here to the west, weakening frontal boundary, could bring some considerable moderate icing in toward Adak and Atka. And then the other area here, mostly to the south, but some of that moisture slipping up in toward Prince of Wales Island, Dixon entrance area. And we're going to see some increasing icing chances here for Prince William Sound, the North Gulf Coast, right on down into Kodiak Island. And the jet stream here showing good upper level ridge at 33,000 feet. So we got south to north flow here coming into the North Gulf Coast, and then taking a turn over the top of this ridge back to the northwest there through western Canada. Otherwise, west-northwest 60 knots, turn southwest there across the Seward Peninsula. Not too bad out here to the west. Winds generally southerly at about 65 knots. And at 9,000 feet, westerlies 35 knots, pick up to 40 knots in the central interior out of the southwest. And southeast winds here, 40 to 50 knots there for the eastern Aleutians, again in advance of a frontal system out here that's slowly weakening. And for the southeast coast, this system and that front associated with it, bringing 45 knot winds into the Gulf of Alaska and toward the southeast coast. Taking a look at 3,000 feet, again that front a little more impressive at this elevation with a wind 65 knots there off the south coast of the Panhandle, 55 knots blowing across the Gulf of Alaska, light winds over the interior. And we're looking at southeast winds anywhere from 35 to 55 knots here over the Bering Sea, eastern Aleutians areas, but staying west of the Alaska Peninsula. And from there, looking at turbulence with the stronger winds, considerable moderate turbulence there for the eastern Aleutians out to about Atka Island. And also here for the North Gulf Coast on down the Panhandle, considerable moderate turbulence there tomorrow. Light to isolated moderate here up along the lee side of the Alaska Range to about Delta Junction there, and that also extending down to Kodiak Island.